Richard Socarides, former senior advisor to President Clinton. Good morning, and thank you for being with us. You served as principal advisor to President Clinton on gay and lesbian and civil rights issues. We appreciate your time. So how significant are these changes? What's the real impact?
Well, the changes themselves that were announced on Saturday by the Attorney General perhaps are part of a trend, part of a larger trend, where the federal government is aggressively taking steps to recognize same-sex relationships that come out of states where they are legal. Let's keep in mind here that the Attorney General isn't creating any new legal rights. He's simply saying that if you were married in a state and it was legal when you were married, where you can now, which can happen now in 17 states and the District of Columbia, that the federal government will recognize those marriages for all purposes. So it's a very positive development and indicates that the Justice Department is very aggressively recognizing those rights.
And an example of what President Obama talked about with his pen and his phone, moving ahead, not waiting for Congress or even the states to act necessarily.
Yes, and he's been doing this in this area of LGBT rights more aggressively, perhaps for some time now. You'll remember it was a couple of years ago that he announced that he had changed his position. He had evolved, so to speak, on the issue of same-sex marriage. The Justice Department was active as a participant on the side of gay rights activists in the Supreme Court cases that we saw last summer. So this is part of an important trend.
So critics have said that this decision undermines the authority and sovereignty of the states to make their own determinations regarding the institution of marriage. What's your response?
Well, let's keep in mind, right, that this applies only to people who are married in states that where same-sex marriage is already legal. So if you can't be married that's up to state law. I think that's what the Supreme Court really said, is that individual states, so far, the state of the law is that individual states get to decide for themselves what marriages they want to recognize. So far, that may change. But the Justice Department here is only saying that if you're married in a state where it's legally recognized, the federal government is going to recognize it for all purposes. And I think it's a welcome change and a positive development.
And you mentioned 17 states and the District of Columbia. You can see which states do allow same-sex marriage. But what about the states that don't allow it? Does this push them at all? We heard from Senator Ayotte giving a bit of a response. Is this building momentum?
Yes, well, the state where Senator Ayotte is from, as your correspondent mentioned, actually allows same-sex marriage, so I'm not exactly sure what she's complaining about. But maybe theoretically she has some complaints. But listen, it's a very fast-moving trend. Oklahoma and Utah already have federal judges that have said that those states must recognize same-sex marriage. Those decisions are stayed pending appeal. We're expecting a decision out of a federal court in Virginia very soon, almost any day, maybe this week, which we think will be favorable. And this is a national trend, and I predict that within a year or two, the U.S. Supreme Court will make it a nationwide rule, and so these distinctions will become irrelevant.
Mr. Socarides, you've been working on this for a long time. Put this in the cultural framework for us. We see Michael Sam, defensive lineman, college athlete, coming out, talking about being gay. We're going to discuss that more in the program later, but put this in the cultural context for us, what this means for gay rights in America.
Well, and the Michael Sam announcement is a very big announcement this morning. I mean, because he's the first NFL might be the first NFL player. Everybody thinks he's going to go into the NFL. So it's really a marker, because that is seen as such a man's sport, right? But, the culture is changing, and in some ways the culture is changing faster than I mean, you see on television now in prime time shows that feature gay characters, even young high school gay characters. I mean, the world has changed in many respects, and the government and our political leaders are catching up with the changes we see in the culture. And Michael Sam, very important milestone this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Richard Socarides, former senior advisor to President Clinton.